Now we have an opportunity to bring in Bob Kelly of the Intercontinental Hotel Group. And I will take over presentation rights here. Okay. Bob, there you are. Hello. Welcome.
Good morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing today?
Doing all right.
All right. All right. So I understand that you're going to take some time to talk about how you've managed enterprise scale and ultimately how you used an embrace, don't replace approach to find some success within IHG. Is that correct?
Yeah, we ran into some things that that guided us down a path that's very similar to the one you just described.
Awesome. Perfect. I was scared that you'd say something completely different than what I just talked about. Okay, I'll go ahead and go off camera, and the floor is yours, Bob.
All right, let me work out the screen share.
All righty. And you're in present. Yeah, there you go. All right. I'm excited. Yep, you got it. I'm excited to hear this, Bob.
All right. Well, thank you and welcome everybody to CloudBees Connect. I was introduced. I'm Bob Kelly. I'm the Director of Delivery Engineering at IHG, which is our DevOps program. And I'm going to share with you some of our experiences that we had in rolling out DevOps at IHG. Just a little bit about the company to help you understand what we do. IHG is a hotel management and marketing company. You've probably heard of some of the brands that you see on screen. There are actually, I think, even two more than we're showing here. The company has grown well and we have a worldwide presence. Currently, we have approximately 6,000 hotels worldwide. We're in more than 100 countries. We manage more than 850,000 rooms globally. We have 1,900 hotels in the pipeline, so you can see we are growing well. We have 18 brands currently, and we have a little bit more than 100 million active Reward Club members. So we have a fairly decent audience size and a global reach. To give you an idea of what my team deals with, here is a dependency map of the applications that we're responsible for. So you can see it's not terribly huge, but it does get a little complicated at times. When we first got started, we wanted to put together some high-level goals or ambitions for ourselves. And when we were putting together the initial business case, we established these as some of the goals we wanted to achieve. At a high level, that's automation and certification. We wanted transparency and visibility into what we were doing, what was going on our platform, and how things were going for individual applications and teams. We wanted to work on process improvement, but we definitely wanted to be a supporter of innovation and not let that lag behind. So we took that a little bit further. We broke it into additional goals at a deeper level. As you can see, we have goals around culture, agility, and that's one of the big driving things around DevOps is the ability to get software in the hands of the user as quickly as possible to meet their needs. Users have gotten quite demanding, and so we have to be able to modify or create or improve the user experience on a nearly constant basis. Quality is at the center of all of that. Usability is a big part of that, and a company's ability or a team's ability to work in a shift-left model with appropriate testing is a major driver for us. And of course, with as large a footprint as we have, you can imagine that security is a major concern. If possible, we'd like to reduce costs and always driving innovation. So the team put together a series of guidelines that we thought we would drive through the organization. As you look at the slide, and I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, you can see, I hope, that we tried to put serious effort into creating a single page that would give an idea of what we were all about and what we were trying to do in support of the teams and for the company. Once we had organized all of this wonderful information, we basically thought, we've got it going on. So with our new and improved set of goals, we thought we would go right into the market. And for us, the market is the teams at IHG. We have hundreds of engineers at IHG working on any number of applications. And so, and we had been working for some time with the web development team as sort of our beginning group. And with that experience and what we had put together, we thought, what could go wrong? Well, the first thing that we ran into was a bit of a roadblock. We knew that because we had a large organization and we had a lot of teams working in disparate groups, that there would be a few issues. But what we found was that there was a lot more for us to deal with than we had originally expected. There were significant differences in the teams and their cultures and processes. And we intended to bring what we had learned with the web team out to everybody. With that initial standardization consideration, confronted with the disparity with the teams, what we found ourselves with was a position of trying to bridge the difference between where we were and thought we were going and where the teams were and where they thought they were going. We were having some success, but it was harder than we expected it to be. So we realized that we really needed to rethink a little bit. We needed to think about what role we were taking and how we were going to engage our development community and the various teams in moving forward. So we decided to take more of a consultative or service mindset. Joe Brito put together an ebook that actually speaks to some of the things that we wanted to change. So we realized one size doesn't fit all, and that we may be the DevOps team, but we have a lot of great developers with ideas that represent an incredible value opportunity. So we knew our biggest problem was going to be when you ask who wants change, you get significant positive response. But when it comes time to who wants to change, you find yourself sometimes in an empty room. And I think in part, a lot of this is driven by the fact that speed is oversold in conversations around DevOps. Everybody wants to go faster, but when you really dig into the how do you get to go faster safely, you realize that there's quite a bit of effort in it. And you might have less support initially until you've made people aware of how you make that transition. So it doesn't take very long looking at this particular slide to recognize which of the 4 emotional energy blocks you would want to work with. Obviously, proactivity and acceptance represent the better opportunities. I think it depends on where you are in the journey of implementing DevOps. I'm sure many of you have already got programs going. Some of you are getting them going, and maybe even some are considering creating one. As you go about evaluating the teams and recognizing where you think they stand, I think that you should have one additional value that you add to the matrix here so that you can understand where your initial successes can come from. And that's finding those teams that have the right attitude and that have already incorporated a quality factor in their development cycle. And that's fairly easily measured by what their current unit test coverage looks like and what level and scope of automated testing, functional testing that they've already developed. When you look at the timeline for an average delivery flow, the long pole in the tent ends up being how long does it take to test this application relevant to the balance of the flow. The build and deploy components of a delivery flow don't really take very long, but the testing component can take significant time. And so that incorporated into this evaluation will help you recognize where some of your short-term wins can come from. With these things in mind, we decided that we would sort of revamp our goals, simplifying them a little bit and changing the approach. So we narrowed it into these 3 categories. We wanted to focus more on the people. We wanted to put together a full communications plan. We've actually got some ideas working on how we can gamify the whole process so we can make it fun for the developers and the teams, and we can show achievement across and share that achievement in ways that make it fun for people to engage with the program. We definitely drive for visibility and the metrics and helping people understand where they are against where they want to be on their goals. And we're hoping for the teams that we can reduce the amount of time that's required by team members to be involved in the build deploy process, and all of that can be automated. So we're working for a semi-automated onboarding process. We are working toward a transparent governance process, one that is not just a rule set handed down and controlled by a third party or some other group in the organization, but shared. So we wanted a voice of the customer component and how that would be put together. And we've documented and are working an intersourcing model because we have a lot of very capable developers who have already brought us good ideas. So we have virtually anybody in the organization can do a pull request to our code base if they've come up with a good idea that they think will benefit either their team or the organization in total. Tools and technology are a big deal, and we have quite a few of them. And we know that the teams are not all using exactly the same tools. We want to make sure that we're supporting all of that. So we've shifted to more of a team support model. And a big portion of that is how is the governance going to work? In some organizations, there's a group that provides governance, and in some places, it's not as flexible as it might need to be. When you're developing a DevOps program, because of the speed of the way you need to move and the differences in teams, the technologies and all that, you really need to have, in our view, and so what we're building is we're building a governance body or panel, and that panel is being made up of each of the groups that you see here. We want business involved so they understand they're a part of the total value stream and they're the very beginning of that, and they need to understand how this works. We want the application development teams represented, testing and quality, infrastructure and operations, security, and of course the DevOps team. This panel then represents the group that will define what the quality gates need to be set to, what the requirements would look like on a larger scale. And the voice of the customer component of this is that every application and team will have a separately configured set of quality gates and goals. And those are defined by the group in concert with the team, and the team can relate to the group at any point they feel a change needs to be made so that they can feel that they're driving at the pace that they can move, as well as achieving the higher level goal that the company might have. So this provides distributed oversight, and it gives our customer, which are the development teams that we work with, a voice in saying how this is going to work for them individually. So our team is organized into these three primary groups. We have an implementation onboarding team. We've progressed well enough in our development process that if a team selects, or if the flow that they're going to use is very similar to one that we've already built, then the onboarding team can build that pipeline for them without the need for forward development effort. We're not so far into it, and I'm not really sure we'll ever be completely into it enough where we won't need forward dev, because things are changing so quickly. And because as you first start, your first pipelines will be simpler, and as you learn more things, you're always going to be coming up with new opportunities. And so we have a forward dev team that builds our custom components, does the intake and code review on inner sourcing contributions that are being made, and building out and enhancing our platform. And then we have a release and environment support team that handles the daily release support activities, the environment support, and a series of other technologies that are there for the team. So now we're requesting that the teams follow certain general guidelines, and we knew that we needed to do exactly the same. We needed our goals and our gates to be monitored in the same way. So we knew that we had to eat our own dog food. If we weren't going to be credible among the teams that we wanted to work with. So, and it was challenging for us to begin with, because while we have a group of developers, we're also working inside a new platform. There are some challenges in doing especially functional tests inside a platform that's integrating with multiple components that have different response sets depending on the circumstance. But we're leveraging a testing framework that was provided by CloudBees, and we are doing pretty well with that. And we have built unit tests and functional tests into our definition of done, so that we're doing exactly what we would hope we can bring the dev teams to do consistently. We also, as a part of our initial setup, decided that we would go ahead and build out 3 environments so that we can move our code through a promotion process that yields the same stability that we know that the dev teams strive for in the things that they're doing for internal and external customer-facing apps. So the things that we ran into when we were working with the initial teams and when we were doing our initial assessment of the team circumstances, we found that there were multiple branch management techniques being used inside the organization. There were a number of merge processes, and rarely were those pull request based. And there was varying levels of code review depending on the branch. A feature branch might have different requirements depending on which model you use. For the most part, we use a Git flow model. So feature branch, then down to the develop branch, and then from there to the master branch. There were multiple build deploy processes, and there were varying levels of unit and functional test coverage and usage. So that represented a fairly interesting challenge. And there was also disparate use of the Lover environments in the way that they flowed their applications, the way they processed their applications through the certification environment. Through all this, though, we realized the differences, and we didn't want to give up on some consistency. We knew that there needed to be a high-level consistency and some standardization that would provide an overarching guide, but we didn't want the definition of that to be so specific that it ended up hindering a particular team based on whether or not they were ready for that. So we knew we couldn't create a super detailed model that would fit everybody. So we built out a simplified abstract of the delivery flow that we think should be able to work for just about any application. So this is that simplified flow. So what we do is we provide a team with 3 workflows or pipelines. We provide the team with a CI pipeline, and we have multiple of those, and it depends on where they are in their journey in terms of, do they currently use feature flags for abstracting incomplete code? Are they using any kind of branch by extraction model to do the same thing? And we're also interested in whether or not they're using mocks or service virtualization in their testing, because all of these things impact the sophistication of the CI model that we can provide. So the basic CI model is the one that you see here. And so this is our full release flow, but each of our pipelines that can be used independently are incorporated into this larger one. The CI flow, I don't know if you can see my mouse. So starting with the trigger at the very beginning, the trigger can be either a manual trigger to start the flow, or it can be a pull request that automates the flow depending on the team and where they are. But the minimum that we would like to see from them on CI would be for it to trigger a base code review, sonar static analysis, unit test, and build to make sure that each of those 3 meet reasonable requirements. And beneath each of the subsections of the flow, you have an idea of some of the kind of metrics that we try to collect as we move through the flow. And you'll see that there are a number of elements down here that we try to collect on the way, but we don't establish hardcore requirements here. We let the teams work their way through. We didn't want to impact them negatively, and so we manage with them all of this, and we give them the ability to do manual overrides. And we just keep track of how often the manual override is required and what the outcome of the delivery was relevant to that flow. So that's the initial CI flow. A more sophisticated one would go ahead and incorporate a deployment and some level of automated testing. So typically a critical path suite, something minimum, but something that takes care of the primary functions for the app. And that would be a more sophisticated CI. which ultimately then is the equivalent of what we call our team build, which is where they can trigger a flow that builds the application and deploys it for them into their development environment. And it does that regardless of what the results for any part of the testing were, so that they'll have a live platform to test while they're in the development phase. And then the final flow is the entire flow that you see here, and that's the one that takes them all the way to production. And you'll notice that the concept here, and the reason we consider this to be something that would work for everybody, is they go through a static analysis, a deployment with initial manual and automated testing. If that goes well, it moves through or to a higher level environment where similar things are done, probably with more exhaustive testing, since this is just pre-prod. And then it moves into prod for a automated deployment, and if needed, a fully functioning triggered rollback if that's necessary. We can definitely relate to Brian's comments on embrace or replace. This is a map of just some of the applications that we use, our tools that we use inside the flow. And I don't think that it actually covers all of them, but it gives you an idea of how many could be involved. And considering that you're basically in contracts with all of these, and those contracts have terms, combined with the fact that we have quite a number of teams and they aren't all using all the same sets, that we needed to be able to support the teams in whatever they do. And so fortunately, CloudBees Flow has a number of powerful integrations that help us integrate to the things that we need to. So the idea here is we didn't want to be in control, we want to be in support. That doesn't mean that if a team doesn't have a selected tool, we obviously will have favorites among these, and so we'll still steer them in the direction of one if they are open to that. But if they really are connected to a particular tool and it's a major part of their program, we don't want to slow their effort down. We don't want to redirect their time into rebuilding the infrastructure of their app dev. We want to support that and then support them as they need to make changes and as they want to make changes as they move forward with that. So we'll work with the team and we'll build out the flow that they need. So I've talked you through kind of how we dealt with things, and we did run into a few issues, but we did have some successes along the way. And so here are just a few ideas of things that we're kind of proud of that we have done in, say, roughly the last 9 months. We built out the entire platform because we operate in a number of data centers worldwide. That was a little bit complicated. As you can see, it took more than 100 VMs. We're in 9 data centers worldwide. And for those of you that have had to work through the challenges of firewall rules in a complex network, you can imagine 300 firewall rules was a challenge. We did develop an inner sourcing model, a documented inner sourcing model where anyone can contribute to our code base. We've built approximately 40 pipelines for dev teams so far and are working on more. The COVID thing slowed things down for us a little bit. But at one point we had 17 applications going at the same time. I'll admit that we're all right with not having to try to keep up with that many all the time, but look forward to more activity in the near future. We can now deliver our web property to 8 data centers worldwide in less than 2 hours with no downtime. We had always been pretty good with the no downtime piece, but as a part of this journey, we've worked with the dev team to go from a monolithic application to a group of single page applications. And from single page applications, they have gone to a Lambda S3 model with using Akamai's edge network for cache, which enables us to move faster and be more responsive from a user standpoint. And we are now delivering to on-prem and cloud platforms. We are delivering to AWS in multiple ways, Lambda and S3 included. We're delivering to Google Cloud using their function and data flow models. We're delivering to OpenShift currently as our container platform, but are looking at expanding into both AWS and Google's managed Kubernetes models. And this is me doing the overselling the speed. Our most progressive teams, so we have some really progressive teams in terms of their dev process and model. And one of those teams that has a very strict, by their own definition, a very strict quality gating model and a full deploy CI model for every single PR working out of develop. So they are basically a trunk-based model, and they put every single PR through an exhaustive certification. They are now able to move a new version to production in less than 30 minutes, where in the past it was taking them a week. And one of the things that we're kind of excited about relevant to our onboarding process is now we're working on a parameterized microservice pipeline implementation that we believe eventually we'll be able to do a service catalog item where someone would fill out a relatively detailed form, but with that construction or with that form complete, we would be able to build that pipeline and make their delivery available within an hour of the completion of the form. So that gives you an idea of the process and flow, the journey that we have been on and are on. I don't believe the process and its improvement will ever end. And I actually look forward to the changes that we're making in the future. And because we are involved in so many platforms, I'm very interested to know what CloudBees is bringing to the table in the software delivery management construct, because gathering information from all those systems, normalizing it in a way that can provide true visibility into our delivery model is one of the things that we're after. That's my presentation. Thank you. I hope that helped in some way, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.